Hello everyone, very good morning to all of you. So friends, welcome back to Anthropology PYQ series. So friends, here in Anthropology PYQ series, we are trying to just decode every question and master every concept. So as a part of today's discussion in day 21, let us try to proceed with another important question, right? So the question of the day for us is this. So look at the question. Compare and contrast the symbolic approaches of Clifford, Geertz and Victor Turner to understand the culture. So this is the question that is there with us. So have you done with this particular question? So if anyone has done that, so you can just mention in the comment section that you have done that particular question. That means written that particular question, right? So first of all, like I would like to just ask you a question. So basic question is that, so what were the approaches that were being proposed by Clifford, Geertz and Victor Turner? So as a part of symbolic anthropology, so Victor Turner's approach and our Clifford, Geertz approach. So what are the approaches proposed by them? So you can just mention in the comment box. So first, let us proceed with the basic approach portion of the answer. So what you can just mention in the introduction, what you have to mention in the body and what you have to mention in the conclusion. So let's try to see the approach part of the answer. So there, first, in the very introduction, what you have to mention, in the very introduction as I regularly say, so let's proceed with the on-board presentation today so that you can just understand the clear-cut things in a systematic fashion. So here, in the very intro, what you can do. So in introduction of the question, you can simply pick and mention about the central theme. So what is the central theme here? So here the central theme of the question is with respect to the symbolic and interpretive theories. So symbolic school of anthropological thought. So that's how. So there you have to just start with this symbolic school. Symbolic school of thought. So you can simply introduce and you can mention what is all about this. So what is the basic background of this particular school of thought? So how we can just introduce basically, you can simply say that. So symbolic and interpretive school of thought has been started in 1960s in reaction to some of the theories like structuralism, functionalism, like that. So that's how you can say. So that's how you can just basically introduce the answer with the central theme, right? So that's one thing that you can do. Then later on, so what's the body portion of the answer? In the body portion, what you have to answer. So in the body of the answer, so you should address the chief demand. So what is the chief demand here? The demand of the question is basically that we should try to compare and contrast the approaches of Clifford, Geertz and Victor Turner. So when we say this thing, like when we have the keywords, like you have to understand and you have to address the keyword also, or tailword. So what is the keyword here? The keyword here is compare and contrast. So when there is a keyword like this, compare and contrast, so you have to mention the similarities and the differences. So in a systematic fashion, you have to highlight the similarities between their approaches and you have to differentiate their approaches. So that is one thing. So the demand is that. So you have to highlight similarities in their approaches plus the differences in the approaches of Clifford, Geertz and Victor Turner. So that's very important aspect. Then what you can do in the conclusion, so in very conclusion, you can simply mention about the relevance and significance of this particular school. So that's how you can say to what extent their studies or the thoughts proposed by this particular school is still relevant. So that's how you can conclude the answer. So you can just pick and you can just mention. So this is how you can keep your introduction, right? So now let's check. So whatever you have written. So a very good morning to all of you once again. So first, let's see. The question was like the approaches proposed by Clifford, Geertz and Victor Turner. So first approach is like, very good. So Geertz, interpretive approach by Venushri, very good. So Pragna is saying that Clifford, Geertz, interpretive approach, Victor Turner, symbolic approach, very good. So aspirant is saying Clifford, Geertz, interpretive approach and Victor Turner's symbolic approach. So good. So all of you have mentioned the very right answer. So Clifford, Geertz is very well known for the interpretive approach, as well as our Victor Turner is very well known for the symbolic approach to the symbolic school of anthropological thought. So now let us try to know more about this particular school of thought, and let's try to understand how we can differentiate and how we can just highlight the similarities between both of their approaches. So first, you have to just remember this. So what approaches they have proposed and how they have proceeded further. So that thing makes the difference. So here, when we see from the symbolic anthropology point of view, it's a school of anthropological thought that has been emerged in the early 1960s, and it has been developed as a reaction to some of the existing grandeur theories. So what are those grandeur theories? Like, be it could be evolutionism, be it could be diffusionism, be it could be structuralism, be it could be functionalism, all of those things, and cultural materialism, etc. So what all of these schools have done? So if you see from the perspective of evolutionism, so the first theory that has been developed in anthropological realm was evolutionism. So what was the basic premise of evolutionism? So evolutionism was advocating that culture evolves from one stage to another stage in a unilinear fashion. So it starts from savagery to barbarism to civilization. So this is how culture evolves in a systematic fashion in a unilinear way. So that's what the the evolutionism school of thought advocates. Can you able to recollect that? So meanwhile, you can text one of the evolutionary scholars, so whom you can recollect in the chat box. So mention one evolutionary school of thought pioneer. There. Next, we can just proceed with the diffusionism. So what diffusionism was saying? Diffusionism simply says that culture will not evolve in a systematic fashion. Rather, what happens? Culture has been discovered at one place, and then from that one particular place, culture spreads to different parts of the world. So that's what the diffusionism school of thought argues. So where they say that man is basically not uninventive, rather man is imitative. So he has immense power of imitating others. So culture spreads from one part of the world to another part of the world, and it gets originated at a particular place. So that is one thing. So very good. So one of the one evolutionary scholar that you can recollect is E.B. Taylor. Very good. So other scholars, L.H. Morgan, James Fraser. So all of them you can remember. So now, diffusionary school of thought we were discussing. So there, in diffusionary school of thought, you have to recollect some of the important scholars. So there, like for example, from American school of diffusionism, you can remember Franz Boas. So like that, there are so many scholars. W.H.R. Rivers or like Robert Redfield. So all of them were like some of the scholars belonging to diffusionism. So then we have got functionalism. So functionalists, they have explained culture in terms of the function. So can you able to recollect Malinowski's functionalism? It's known as cultural functionalism. And can you able to recollect the Radcliffe Brown's functionalism? It is known as structural functionalism. So like that. Very good. So that's how. So we have those approaches. So they have explained culture in terms of the functions like that. So that is another aspect. There, further if you see from the perspective of the structuralism, so in structuralism, so Clade-Lévi-Strauss. So do you remember Clade-Lévi-Strauss? So Clade-Lévi-Strauss has argued that if you want to understand the culture, then you have to systematically decode, and you have to unravel the logic behind the mind, and you have to systematically understand the human thought process. So structure here refers to the structure of the human thought process. So that's what Clade-Lévi-Strauss said. So in all these theories, they haven't talked anything about symbols. So Clifford Geertz and Victor Turner found out this lacunae in the anthropological theories. So this is where, so Victor Turner and Clifford Geertz, they systematically tried to bring in another important version of the explanation of culture. So where they started explaining the culture in terms of the symbols. So there they have brought in their important approaches and theory. So that is basically known as the symbolic school of anthropology. So symbolic school of anthropology. So this symbolic school of anthropology, so as I have said you, it has been emerged in the early 1960s as a reaction to evolutionism, diffusionism, and the structuralism and functionalism, as well as the cultural materialism. So there were two major branches, or there were two major approaches of this particular school. So one approach has been proposed by Clifford Geertz. So Clifford Geertz, so you should remember their names. And other approach has been proposed by another important scholar known as Victor Turner. So as you have all said, so the Clifford Geertz approach is known as the interpretive approach. Interpretive approach. Whereas the Victor Turner's approach is famously known as the symbolic approach. Symbolic approach. So what is this? So both of them, they have argued, they have rejected the grandeur theories of the functionalism, structuralism, evolutionism, and diffusionism. And they criticized, they are rejected in the sense they criticized and they have mentioned that culture is a web of symbols. Culture is a system of symbols. So both of them together advocated such kind of things. So here, if you say systematically, so Clifford Geertz is basically regarded as the founding father of the symbolic school of anthropology. So where? So what Clifford Geertz said? So Clifford Geertz said symbols are basically nothing but symbols are the vehicles of the transmission of the culture. So that's what the basic assumption or basic thing that the Clifford Geertz said. So they are nothing but the vehicles of transmission of culture. So this is one thing that Clifford Geertz advocated. So where? Let's say for example, what these symbols will do. So symbols will act as the vehicles of transmission of culture. There, let's say for example, there you might have been aware of the practice of wearing sacred thread by some of the communities. So if you see that the practice of wearing sacred thread, so it acts as a symbol. It's a symbol which carries the culture from one generation to another generation. So that's how you can remember that symbol acts as a vehicle of transmission of culture, like that. So whereas what Victor Turner said about the symbols, so he said, or he basically described symbol as, so symbols from his perspective, symbols are nothing but the operators of the social process. Operators of the social processes. So this is the basic definition that has been given by Victor Turner. So he called symbols as the social operators. So what is this social operators? How you can understand? Now let's take up an example. So every one of us will get into the practice of marriage. So there you can take up an example of the tying of the sacred tie, that's Mangal Sutra. So when we tie Mangal Sutra, so the Mangal Sutra basically acts, it's a symbol. So it's a symbolic aspect that a person has got married. So now this Mangal Sutra, so it acts as the operator of that particular social process. So if we say marriage as a social process, for that particular process, Mangal Sutra acts as a operator. So from that particular social process begins. So that's how Victor Turner has explained his concept. So that is one thing we should remember. So this is how they started explaining their approaches. So there, in very basic fashion, you can remember these concepts. Now, in further expansion, in further explanation, so what they have done. So what kind of aspects they have taken. So here, if you see from the perspective of the Clifford Geertz, so Clifford Geertz has explained that his concept through a methodology. So what's the methodology that has been used by Clifford Geertz? So Clifford Geertz, in order to explain his interpretive theory, so he used some concepts. So the methodology that he used was basically to say, so he used the concept of thick description. Do you remember thick description? So you should mention in the body. So in the differences, what is the difference between them? So first, how Clifford Geertz described the symbols, how Victor Turner described the symbols, then what is the methodological differences, like that differences you have to highlight, right? So there, further. So he used the concept of thick description to explain his interpretive theory, whereas, so Victor Turner used the concept of social drama to explain his concept of symbols as the operators of the social process, like that. So where Clifford Geertz, what he has done, he said that symbols are not mere images, rather they carry inbuilt information with them. So if we systematically try to analyze the symbols, then we can systematically able to explain the culture in a different perspective, in a systematic perspective. So that's what Clifford Geertz says. So Clifford Geertz, what he has done, so to explain his concept of thick description, so he used Gilbert Ryle's concept, Gilbert Ryle's explanation of the blink and wink. Do you remember blink and wink? So he used this. So what does this blink and wink says? For example, blinking of the eye and winking of the eye. So blink of an eye is an involuntary twitch which carries a very thin description. It's simply, we can say that blink. Blink means we will simply blink the eye and open eye. That's it. It's an involuntary act and it's an involuntary twitch of the eye. So closing of the eyelids. That's it. So it doesn't carry any sort of inbuilt meaning with it. So whereas if you see from the perspective of winking of the eye. For example, if a particular friend is winking his eye towards his friend, then it may carry some sort of inherent and hidden meaning in it. So if we want to describe the wink of an eye, we should incorporate the thick description. So that is what Clifford Geertz says. So wink of an eye could be a conspiratory signal. Wink of an eye could be a kind of mockery that we are making with others. Wink of an eye, we can just do that with a kind of different meaning. So from that point of view, so what Clifford Geertz says is that, so if you want to explain the blink of an eye, you can do it with a thin description. If you want to explain the winking of an eye, you must and should adapt the thick description. So that's what he said. So thick description means what? You have to just interpret it in a systematic fashion. So furthermore, to explain his concept of the thick description, so Clifford Geertz systematically tried to explain his interpretive theory with a systematic study. So what was the study that has been done by Clifford Geertz? So which society Clifford Geertz studied? So you can just text in the comment box. Right, text it. So now let me explain. So Clifford Geertz has used or systematically studied the Balinese cockfight. Balinese cockfight. Can you able to recollect? So what has happened? So in the year roughly 1958, Clifford Geertz along with his wife, he travels to the Indonesia and Bali. So in Indonesia, Bali, so what Clifford Geertz observes is that, so in the society of Bali, that means the Balinese people, there is a unique tradition of the cockfight tradition. So here what he observed is that the cockfight is not just a kind of entertainment modality. Rather, cockfight has a lot of hidden meaning in it. So what he observed is that, so cock for the Balinese people, it's not a mere bird. So cock for Balinese people, it's a symbol of masculinity. It's a symbol of prestige. And cockfight, whoever wins the cockfight, it also interprets or brings the social power and prestige with them. So that's how, so cockfight among the Balinese of Indonesia, it's not a mere entertainment modality. So that's how he just saw. So what was he observed there? Let's say for example, if two cocks have been fought, so these two cocks, amongst that one will win and one will lose. So the cock one wins is considered as the masculinity and prestige. So why and how does it bring power and how does it denote richness of a person? Means it indicates that the person, if the person is rich, he can feed enough well with a good nutrition to that particular cock. So that's why this particular cock has won, and the cock that has been defeated, so obviously it does not possess such a nutrition. That's why the cock has defeated. So that's how they will interpret. So that shows that the person who is poor cannot feed his cock and cannot let his cock to win. So that's how it is being interpreted. So apart from this, the Balinese cockfight, it's not only a mere entertainment modality. It's a fight between two birds. Rather, it's a system that was systematically explaining the kinship terms. It was a system that was explaining how the social organization and hierarchy is formed in the Balinese people. So that's what the core concept of the Balinese cockfight. Okay, so that is one another important aspect. So there further, like he tried to explain this concept in his book. So what was the name of the book that has been written by the essay that has been written by Clifford Geertz? Can you able to recollect that? So he has mentioned it in his essay. So famous essay that is known as The Deep Play Notes on Balinese Cockfight. So that was the work, or that was the essay. So name of essay was The Deep Notes, Balinese Notes on Deep Play Notes on Balinese Cockfight. So that's how you can mention. Notes on Balinese Cockfight. So this was one thing that you should further mention and further highlight. Okay, so so this is how you should explain the concepts. And furthermore, what Clifford Geertz has done to explain his approach, so there he used the concept of hermeneutics. So this is another important thing that he has done. So he used hermeneutics. What is hermeneutics? Hermeneutics refers to the process. It's a systematic process of which involves or which explains how humans will interpret the various texts, how the humans will interpret the social processes. So that's what it is said in the hermeneutics. So how humans interpret various aspects. So this is what it is present in hermeneutics. So try to remember it. So actually hermeneutics has been first used in the linguistic anthropology to decode and to interpret various texts. That was one thing. Now what Victor Turner has started and how he explained his concept. So Victor Turner has systematically used his approach where he has said the symbols as the social operators. So they will operate a social process. So as we have explained and understood, so let's say Mangal Sutra acts as an operator for the entire process of marriage, like that. So that is one thing. So where his concept of social drama, to explain this, he used the social drama concept. So where what he has done, so he systematically explained this with the systematic ethnographic study of Ndembu tribes of Africa. So amongst Ndembu tribes, so Victor Turner has systematically studied and explained his concept of social drama. So where he systematically said that the concept of this social drama, it's not like whatever the social processes, they are not a simple mere activities. Rather, what happens there? So there systematically we can see some of the important aspects. So where it basically involves some things like, let's say for example, the social drama involves various stages and various activities. So first, all this social drama begins with the breach. This is one important component of the social drama. So what Victor Turner observed among the Ndembu tribes, it all starts with the basic violation of a fundamental rule or law of that particular society. So what was Ndembu tribes? Ndembu tribes is a matrilineal, matriarchal society. So where some of the social processes, they will start, the rituals and the conflict resolution, how does it take place? Means it all starts with the breach of the rule. So where first and foremost thing, so it starts with violation of a rule. So let's say for example, a particular person, he simply challenges the authority of a particular female. So there it's all starts. So after the breach of the law, so then what happens? Then there will arise a crisis situation. This would be the second step in the social drama. So crisis will start. So where two groups, that means two groups will start quarreling amongst themselves. That means some will support the person who has violated and some will support the original established rules. So there what happens? A crisis situation will be established. So to resolve the crisis situation, what happens there? So then the redressive action will start. So the redressive action would be the third step. Redressive action. So in the redressive action, what happens? So for all these Ndembu tribes, the neem trees are considered as one of the important and culturally ritualistic importance they have. So all of these people will meet and they will conduct a village council under the neem trees. So there, what happens there? So systematically, all the village heads and all those things, they will try to look into this particular issue and they will try to resolve or redress that particular activity. So then what happens finally? So once this resolution, so they will work for resolution of the issue. So finally what they will do after this, reintegration occurs. So after reintegration, that means they will they'll become normal. So society will function again normal. So this is how, so what he found, Victor Turner found is that he studied this kind of systems, ritualistic studies in Ndembu tribes. So there he tried to explain that symbols will act as the operators of a process. So social process. So entire social processes will run according to a social drama. So the main cogwheel of his theorem is the social drama. So you should remember this one. So from the perspective of Clifford gauge, you should remember the concept of thick description. So that's how you can remember, and you have to mention the basic differences between them. So right, so that is one thing. So here if you see from our Clifford Geertz perspective, so Clifford Geertz, he engaged or he used emic method or emic approach of studying the culture. So what do you mean by emic approach? Emic approach means insider view of studying a culture. When an anthropologist systematically he engages himself and he becomes part and parcel of the society and he tries to learn the culture, and then once he just studies that particular culture, that is known as emic method. So do you remember etic and emic perspectives? So emic perspective or emic approach of study. So what is this? So it is basically, it is nothing but insider view of study of the culture. What is this insider view again? That means here basically anthropologist will become one of the member of that particular culture. He tries to learn the local language, then he tries to mingle with that particular tribal society as a part and parcel of that. So he learns, follows the culture, and he follows the rituals on daily basis. So that's how, so this is an emic perspective, it gives an insider view. So where our Clifford Geertz used this approach. Is that it clear? Now, whereas if you see what Victor Turner has done, so Victor Turner has adapted the etic perspective of studying the culture. What is this etic perspective? Etic perspective is basically, it is nothing but it's the outsider view of studying the culture. Outsider view of studying the culture. So this is something. So what is this outsider view of studying the culture? Here, anthropologist will not become a member of the particular culture. Rather, he tries to observe that particular culture from a distance place. So he tries to study the culture of a society from a far away position. So where he will not become a member of that particular culture. He merely observes. Either it could be through the books, either it could be through the ethnographic works, or either it could be through documentaries, or it could be through a distance observation of that particular society. So that's all. So that is known as etic perspective. So here are Victor Turner. So he used the etic perspective to study the Ndembu tribes of Africa, whereas Clifford Geertz used the emic approach or emic perspectives to study the Balinese society. So that's where you should remember. Now, if you can recollect the concept of this etic and emic, so can you able to just mention who introduced the terms etic and emic for the first time in anthropology? If you can able to recollect, you can just text in the chat box. So that's one thing. Etic and emic perspectives. So this is one important fact that you should highlight as the difference. Is that it clear for you all? Now let me just reveal the answer for the question. So there was a scholar who is known as Kenneth Pike. So Kenneth Pike was the scholar, so who introduced the concepts of the etic and emic for the first time. So the words etic and emic has been derived from the phonetic and phonemic. So linguistics, from linguistics we have adapted these things. So this is one another difference that you should highlight. So like this, you should systematically mention and you should systematically highlight the differences in a systematic way, right? So that's all from the basic differences point of view. So what heads you can take how how their approaches differs in explaining the nature of the culture. So that's one thing. Then you can say what was the focus area of them. So that is another important aspect that you can say. Further, you can say how they defined symbols. So that's one thing. Then you can take up in methodology how they differ. So then in approaches, so what approaches they have used to explain their approach. So that is one thing. So then further, what are the basic their views about the society? So like that's one could be one another important modality of the difference. So further examples, with the help of examples also, like here as we have saw the example, so you can mention, so he explained Balinese cocktail, he used the Undembu rituals. So that's how, that is another difference. So then what's the works that are being done by them? So that is another important thing. So like that, systematically you can use various aspects. So in similarities, you can say basically that both of them treat culture as a web of symbols. So that's one thing, and they argued and they systematically explained that these aspects, like both, they try to establish the symbols in the central way of understanding the culture. So that's what you can highlight. So that's with respect to the question, that is the systematic comparing and contrasting with respect to the Clifford, Geertz and Victor Turner's approaches of studying culture. Is that clear? So that's all for the day from my side. So if there is any doubts, you can just pick and mention and the chat box. So if there are any further doubts, you can just ask me. So friends, let's wind off the discussion for today and let's meet tomorrow with another important question. Right, so till then what you have to do, so try to write answers for all the questions, and those who are watching the series for the first time, you can also just go through the previous questions which we have discussed, and you can just get to understand the systematic pattern of the answers. So here I would like to ask you one question. So for all those who have joined through online, you can just mention in the chat box, and for those who will watch it in the video form, who are watching in the video form, you can just mention in the comment section. So there, shall we proceed with the on-board presentation? I'm talking about the presentation. Shall we proceed with on-board presentation, or shall we proceed with the PowerPoint presentation? So which one do you prefer for our further discussions? You can just pitch it and you can just mention, so that we can adapt one good strategy. So if you are comfortable with the PowerPoint presentations, how we used to do in the previous sessions, so we can just proceed like that. Or if you are comfortable with today's kind of on-board presentation, like we can proceed with that. So which modality would you like to just proceed? So you can just mention in the chat box. Or those who are watching in the video format, so you can just mention in the comment section which one would be the best one that you can follow. Yes. Okay, Pragna is saying that. So here we need on-board presentation. Later we want PDFs. Okay, so okay, Pragna, good. So then any others? What about others? Those who have joined through online. So how do you want to just proceed? How can we proceed? Do you want PowerPoint presentation or on-board presentation? On-board presentation means systematically I'll be using the board to explain things. So like this. So you can get this kind of explanation. So that's one thing. PowerPoint presentation means how we used to just use on regular basis. Yes. Any further comments? So shall we wind off? Right. So I hope let's wind off here. So I'll just look into this and I'll just let's come to one conclusion. So that's all for the day from my side. So friends, thank you all for joining me with the live session, and those who are watching in the video format, so you can also furnish your modality which you would like to prefer. So we'll meet tomorrow on 11:30 a.m. and let's solve another important question and let's master the concept. So meanwhile you have to write the answers. So write all the answers and post it in the Telegram channel. So thank you all for joining with me for this session.